All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. We're going to be talking about why Missouri workers deserve a clean slate and how clean slate expungement legislation could impact and improve the lives for people all across the state of Missouri, especially workers. We are going to start things off with kind of just an overview of clean slate, what we're talking about, why we need it, and what clean slate legislation is, including some of the specifics of the legislation that has been filed in our House and Senate. And then we are going to turn it over and hear from a really great group of 4 panelists talking about the need for clean slate and the way they see it in their communities. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get it started. For folks just joining us, if you could go ahead and put your introduction in the chat, just your name and what brings you here this evening or what you're excited to learn about, that would be wonderful. My name is Gwen Smith. I'm with Empower Missouri. We are the organizational lead on the Clean Slate campaign and working closely with Missouri Worker Center, along with a lot of other wonderful organizations and community groups around the state to try to bring clean slate to Missouri. Tonight, we are also going to be hearing from Lenny Jones, Missouri State Director and Vice President of SEIU Healthcare Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Kansas. Jay Lopez, Amazon worker and leader with Missouri Worker Center. Fran Marion, who is a fast food worker and leader with Missouri Worker Center. And then Gary Thomas, who is a UAW Local 249 leader. So to start off with, I'm just going to kind of go through what our current expungement process looks like, why we need clean slate legislation so badly in Missouri. So just some key statistics to kind of bear in mind as we're talking about this, just context. Missouri has the 7th highest incarceration rate in the country, and nearly 2 million Missourians have criminal records. So this is something that really impacts everybody in every community. More than $725 million is spent annually in our state on corrections cost. I'm sure we can all think of better places to put that money in our state. There is a lot of need in a lot of different areas across our state. And that corrections budget certainly prevents money from going to other programs in needed areas. So the current expungement process is costly, it's time consuming, and it is confusing. And the first people to tell you this will be the attorneys that are helping people file expungement claims through the petition-based process. Even for attorneys that, have gone to law school, spend all their time doing this, even for them, it is an ornery process that is not easily accessible for anybody that didn't go to law school, certainly. It's really made not to be accessible. And it really hinders the expungement legislation that we currently have on the books, which has over 500,000 people that qualify for expungement in Missouri under our current laws, but only 1% of those individuals have actually been able to access an expungement for those reasons I'm talking about. It's confusing. It's not an easy process for somebody to walk through. And before you even get to attorney cost, it costs about $500 just for the different fines and fees. There also might be transportation required. You have to go back to the county of origin for each offense. And the upshot of all of this is again, that just 1% of folks have actually been able to access this. If you had any kind of program with a 1% success rate, you'd be able to pretty soundly say this program is not working and we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out a better solution. And that's what we're proposing with Clean Slate. Just some of the collateral consequences of a criminal record that I think are important to understand why expungement is so important and how it really opens the doors for people to be able to fully rejoin society and get out from that perpetual punishment of a criminal record. Consequences of a record impact all different areas of somebody's life, from housing to employment, certainly, not just being able to get employment, but also getting higher paying employment, family stability is undermined. Everybody is impacted and everybody suffers when somebody is suffering the collateral consequences of a criminal record. There's difficulty accessing education or other training programs that could increase somebody's earning potential or open up other opportunities, and again, limited employment opportunities. We know that applicants with a record are only half as likely to get a call back as other applicants from a potential employer, and that there's nearly 50,000 state and federal regulatory restrictions that impact people with a record. In our state, that includes not being able to serve on a jury, different employment, different housing that you're blocked out of, public benefits, voting. The list goes on and on, even to things as small as not being able to chaperone on a kid's school visit. So things that really show up in all different aspects of somebody's life and somebody's family life. Background checks, private background checks are used by 2 and 3 colleges, almost 9 in 10 employers, and 8 out of 10 landlords. And these private background checks are really what would be the most impacted by clean slate legislation. In Missouri, when we talk about expungement, we are talking about record sealing rather than full record clearance. Record clearance means that that record is effectively destroyed and nobody can access it. Record sealing means that law enforcement and the courts still have access to those records. If somebody commits an offense or something like that in the future, they can still go back and see the previous charge. But these private background companies no longer would have access. And somebody can honestly answer the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony on a job application? They can honestly answer no if their record has been expunged. Nearly half of children in the US have at least one parent with a criminal record. So this is a family issue across the country. And clean slate legislation, we believe, is really the right way forward because it levels the playing ground. It makes the legislation that we currently have on the books, the current law of the land, it actually makes that accessible and allows people to access expungements as the legislation that was passed back in 2016 intended. We know that a year after a record's been cleared, people are 11% more likely to be employed. So the positive impact of record sealing shows up right away. And on average, the wages of people that receive expungements increase more than 20% just in that first year after the record's been sealed. 5 years after an expungement, individuals were less likely than members of the general public to be convicted of a crime. So we often, hear opposition to clean slate or other reforms like this, and people saying that they're worried that it's going to make our community more dangerous. And we see that actually the opposite is true, and that we increase community safety when people are given opportunities to thrive. And so this is our current legislation that has been filed. This is what the campaign has really been working towards. We had over the summer, our partners at UMKC worked with community partners to get feedback on drafting the legislation. So we've got some really good details in the actual clean slate bills. And then we've got good sponsors in Republican leadership from Representative Phil Cristofanilli with House Bill 353, and then Senate Bill 347 is sponsored by Senator Curtis Trent. Representative Cristofanilli is from the St. Charles area and Senator Trent is in the Springfield area. Those are any of your local elected leaders. So just a couple notes about the current legislation that's being filed, and then I'm going to turn it over to our panelist. So the process is part of what's really defined in the legislation. The state would be responsible for processing notification and updating those records on a monthly basis. So we're taking the onus off of the individual through petition-based and putting it onto the state departments through automatic expungement. Anybody, as the legislation is currently written, and the caveat, of course, is that we're still in the midst of legislative session. Neither of the bills have had their initial hearings yet, so there definitely could be changes. But as the legislation currently stands, any offense that's currently eligible under Missouri law for expungement would be eligible for automatic expungement, given that that individual had met the waiting period criteria. Those waiting terms are different depending on what type of offense it is. And then reporting requirements, this is just to make sure that clean slate legislation is having the impact that it's intended, and that the state is fully carrying out their side of the deal. So starting 3 years after the law would go into effect, annual reports to the Senate and House to ensure compliance and effectiveness. And those reports would have to include data on who is receiving expungements aggregated by race and by offense type to ensure that there's no discrimination happening. Fees. So in the legislation now, court fees and fines would not need to be paid in advance of an expungement. They still need to be paid, but not as a prerequisite. That's one thing that can really bar somebody from being able to access an expungement. If you're struggling to find good employment because you've got a criminal record and you're not able to easily pay off those fines and fees, and you have to do those in order to get an expungement, you can quickly see how it becomes an insurmountable feat for somebody to achieve. Unpaid restitution for an offense does still need to be paid in full before somebody would be eligible. And lifetime limits. This is the biggest piece of feedback I think we were getting from the community and from advocates, is that with the lifetime limits currently in place for expungements, they just really will never have the impact that they need to have. Not very many people have only a sole felony on their record, and the current limit to 1 felony and 2 misdemeanors leaves a whole lot of people out. So you could, still go get that 1 felony removed for your record, but if you have multiple felonies that would still show up on a background check, it's understandable why somebody might not go through that process or might not feel like it's worthwhile to start it. So we are seeking to increase that cap to 3 felonies and 5 misdemeanors, knowing that that's still just kind of our foot in the door and hopefully a good starting point. Other states that have passed clean slate legislation have returned in subsequent years and expanded the legislation, and that's certainly what we hope that we'll be able to achieve in Missouri. And then implementation timeline, if the clean slate bills are passed, the state would have 2 years to put the proposed changes into effect. All right, does anybody have any questions over that portion of our presentation before we hear from our panelists?
I wondered if this also covers arrest that did not result in convictions or were acquitted.
Thank you for that question, Natalie. That's a really good question and one that I should have highlighted. So yes, arrest, non-convictions, infractions like municipal violations, all of those things are covered under automatic expungement. The process looks a little bit different because the same state record holders don't necessarily apply. So the onus for clearing some of those records is on the circuit courts and other kind of localized agencies, but yes, those are all definitely included. We know that all of those can show up on a background check. All of those can ban people from being able to succeed. All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. This evening, we're just going to hear from all of our panelists kind of one by one, just about their story, what brings them here this evening, and what they think that the audience needs to know about why we need clean slate. And then we will take them through a couple questions, open to audience questions. So feel free to put them in the chat, or if we are at a Q&A section, you can also just take yourself off mute and ask your question directly. So without further ado, I will turn it over, I apologize because I'm not sure if we discussed in order. If you guys did discuss in order, then you know who goes first. And if you didn't discuss in order, then just surprise us, I guess. So thanks, everybody.
I'll go first. Hello, everybody. My name is Fran Marion. I'm with the Missouri Workers Center in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm a Taco Bell manager, and I am also a felon. Simply put, for me, it would mean I'd be able to live life. People have a misconceived notion that felons have messed up the community or we're bad for society. And I'm here, and I'm a living proof that that's not true. I'm one of the ones that only have one felony on my record, and I've literally been judged by that one felony. It's hard to get housing, jobs. We're only subjected to low income jobs, and it's just like it's not fair. I feel that I did my time. I served my sentence. I've came back and I've prospered in society to where I haven't had to go back. Why is it that I'm still walking around with X's on my back and being judged for a crime that I paid my time for?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fran. Jay, would you like to go next?
Yeah, that's perfect. Actually, I didn't know, we're just doing introductions at the moment. So my name's Jay Lopez. I'm a father of 5. I work at Amazon in St. Peters, Missouri. I'm a photographer and a youth football coach out here in Wentzville. I started organizing with the Missouri Workers Center back in May. I think Natalie asked a question, which is super important to me as well. Got arrested a bunch in my 20s for a car that I was unable to register from a shady dealer that we had here in town. So that's kind of my story. I applied to multiple jobs to get out of the hospitality industry that Fran's currently working in. At that time, I applied, interviewed for a company called Serco. And Serco was the Affordable Care Act when Obama had introduced that. I got offered a job there. That job got rescinded because of my state court arrests. And then later I tried to apply for a job at the post office, which also got rescinded because you had to have a valid ID for the past year. So I wasn't able to get that job either. I ended up landing at Amazon in 2019, where a bunch of people have similar stories and get exploited daily because they can't find better work.
Thank you, Jay. Lenny, if we could hear from you next, just about your role in the Missouri labor movement and introduction.
Yeah, so again, Fran and Jay, thank you for sharing your stories. That's hard stories, and I'm sure hard to share publicly as well. So appreciate you doing that. So I am with Service Employees International Union. We're a healthcare union covering 4 states. We represent 90,000 workers across Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Kansas in hospitals, in nursing homes, in home care, and in child care. And what I am really feeling from this conversation is really the barriers to quality jobs in healthcare, right, is what this is all about. So we have a vision of creating jobs in the care economy where workers can thrive, right? So thriving means a minimum wage of $25 an hour. Thriving means having a career path forward so you're not stuck doing the same job for the rest of your life. Thriving means having, retirement and free healthcare, right? So one of the things that is definitely an impediment to thriving is the bulk of workers who have felony convictions. The only jobs available to them are in EBS, in our hospitals, dietary workers, in our nursing homes, housekeeping or laundry aides, whereas the jobs that really provide the good pay are the technical jobs, right, that you see in hospitals, the nursing jobs, and there is no ability to even get the training to get those jobs or to apply for those jobs because of that felony conviction. So I think this is a critical obstacle that we have to deal with in order to reach that vision of creating a thriving career in the care economy. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Lenny. All right, and Gary.
Hi, everybody. Again, thanks to everybody else for sharing. My name is Gary Thomas. I am currently serving my membership of 8,000 as the guide on the executive board. Before that, I was a chair of several committees, the motorcycle committee and the education committee. And before that, I was a criminal. I was hit by a manager while on a picket line, and I got charged and convicted with property damage. To put this in perspective, as when I was chair of the motorcycle committee, this committee of 30 members from 8,000 volunteered over 100,000 hours collectively of community service. They won 2 awards for their work from within our community. It was made much harder to do this because I had that conviction on my record. I was hit by a car. The manager hit me on the picket line, and I got charged. I got convicted, and I served probation for that. I am a criminal in the eyes of the justice system simply for fighting for my rights, as Fran and can attest, as Jay can attest. When you stand up and fight, or when you're put in a situation where life is a fight every single day, or you're doing this, and it just makes it harder and harder and harder. But thanks to my union, thanks to the workers around me, thanks to my lawyer, Mark Ellenbrock, I'll call him out, State Rep Ellenbrock, who helped me out there a lot. So, other than that, that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here this evening. I'm really looking forward to the rest of our discussion. Next question for the panel. What are some of the collateral consequences of a criminal record? We've already kind of heard it touched on a little bit, but if you could just dive into it a little bit more. Consequences of a record that you've seen either in your own life or in the lives of the people that you work with or your union members.
In my own life, I've seen it to where, like I stated, I was only giving a list of companies that give jobs, or like they say, second chances to those of us that have committed felonies. And the thing with that was that those jobs are still the jobs out here that have even given us first chances to live. I've done it with housing, to where if you committed a felony, you have these landlords now that don't even want to rent to you. Even no matter how long ago it was, or what the incident was, they don't want to rent to you. So having committed a felony, it makes life really, really difficult. And for me, it's more difficult because not only am I dealing with the fact that I committed a felony and I did the time and I'm back out in society to do my best to live, but also my kids are doing the time with me, because when I suffer, whether it be housing or economical, they suffer with me. So it's kind of like I did my time, but I'm still doing a life sentence. And not only am I doing a life sentence, my kids are doing that life sentence with me. That's how I feel Kalata has cost me, or I'm dealing with it.
That's really powerful, Fran. Thank you for that. Jay, did you want to add? I saw you're off mute.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did touch on it a little bit in my introduction, but like I said, in my 20s, just being kind of young and dumb and not knowing better. I didn't attend court for some of those tickets I got, so my license got suspended. I got arrested for that suspension, or for missing court is the part that made me a criminal. So I would be a fugitive of justice. I would get pulled over again because my plates are expired. I'd get arrested again, so on and so forth. Couldn't pay those fines because I didn't have a great job at the time to do so. And then when I tried to escape that and get a better job, I was then denied multiple times. That's about it for me. I end up at Amazon, and then in organizing, trying to speak with my coworkers. One of the hurdles definitely is a lot of people are grateful for having this second chance job. They don't feel as if they have the mobility to really get involved, because if they lose their job, they don't have a lot of choices or options out there. And these companies, they know that, right? They beat their chest and pride themselves on being second chance jobs, but also just means, which, like, understandably so, like, it's great that they have something, but those companies know that they're in need, right? So they exploit them.
That's a really, really important point. Thank you for highlighting that. Lenny, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just to emphasize again that, especially in the healthcare industry, the pathway to, jobs that a worker can thrive in are ones that need licensing, right? So again, nursing school, learning how to operate an ultrasound machine, for instance, or an X-ray machine. And again, if somebody has barriers to accessing the education to even get that job, right, then it's just not going to be there. So kind of like what Jay was saying and Fran was saying, kind of the only options in the healthcare industry are your lower paying, job classifications like, EDS, like dietary work.
So people are really held back from advancement.
Right.
Being able to pursue different opportunities and different career paths. Gary, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, as everybody said, it's the lack of upward mobility. We hear a lot of talk about generational wealth, but we don't ever address generational poverty, right? And this system is set up to create just that, is generational poverty. You have a better chance of winning the lottery than you do moving up a tax bracket, especially when you're impoverished currently. So this stops you from getting better jobs. This impoverishes your kids. Without going into the system, without getting an expungement, you're more likely to commit a crime and go back because you're impoverished. Our system, our jail system, our carceral state really relies on recidivism to come back and create a revolving door, especially as you, without getting too radical about it, but when you realize that America owns a company called Unicor, and they make McDonald's uniforms, they make police uniforms, they make all this stuff for pennies on the dollar. And they really rely on this revolving door of recidivism and keeping wages low in the working class. And I mean, it really, as for union members, it hurts us at the bargaining table, because when wages are low and we're trying to fight for higher wages, it's an anchor to the working class completely. The people aren't the anchor. The system is creating this anchor. A rising tide may lift all ships, but an anchor will drown us all.
Thank you all for that. You really illustrated the way that when somebody's sentence ends, their punishment is really not done. It's just evolving, right? There's continued, I like to think of it as perpetual punishment. It's once you've had that first entanglement with the criminal legal system, it becomes very, very difficult to disentangle yourself from it. And it is by design, right? So next question, how do you see criminal records as a barrier to creating or accessing good paying jobs in Missouri? I mean, I know that we've kind of already gotten into this conversation a little bit, so we can just continue to talk about that. How have you seen this in the sector of the economy that you work in, whether that's food service, warehousing, manufacturing, or healthcare? Ryan, I'll turn it over to you first.
I mean, we have touched on it, and it goes back as saying that the only jobs we get are maybe the warehouse jobs, fast food, jobs are being offered to us. And like I said, and Jay said, they call themselves second chance jobs, or giving you a second chance. But if we had the first chance and weren't in poverty, and they gave us a living wage and allowed us to grow and keep up with the economy, I don't believe that we would be in the situations that we were in, to have to still be to fighting for our freedom, because we'll have a chance to live and survive. That wouldn't, how would you put it? Desperate times call for desperate measures. See, it's just like they said, these jobs, they know that we need them. So therefore you can pay us as low as you can, because we can't go anywhere, because if we don't work, we get sent back. So that ties into the revolving door that we talked about, because you have to work to keep your freedom.
Makes me think, I've been to many a reentry conference or reentry panel that is hyper focused on employment as the solution to all reentry challenges. And there's a lot of focus on like workforce development, right? Like what is needed in the workforce, what are people being trained for when they're in prison? And there's not always much room in the conversation for like, well, what jobs do people actually want to be doing? What do people want to be doing with their lives, right? Let's set our standards further than just not recidivizing or getting that initial lower paying job, and let's really be able to dream bigger for people. And that's what Clean Slate does. It's not something that you're really able to do when you've got that record holding you back. Jay, did you have other thoughts?
No, really what Fran says is exactly how I would respond to that. People with criminal records, right, simply just getting exploited by corporations that call themselves second chance jobs. One in particular, Amazon, the one I work at, it knows, right? And it's able to turn and burn these people. We get people in, get people out, rehire them, fire them, and they plan on keep doing that. So the wages will not get any higher. They won't get any better, right? Because so many people are in need of that job without having a clean record.
Absolutely. Lenny or Gary, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, one of the things that just occurs to me is, in the healthcare industry, there's been tremendous gains in wages that have happened, partly because of the pandemic, right? A lot of workers left the healthcare industry, so there's increased pressure to raise wages to recruit. But there's also, because of the great work of Stand Up KC, the movement for a fight for 15 that has gone on for close to 10 years has finally really come to fruition, has really moved 15 as the new minimum. Even though it's technically 12, most industries, it's now 15. But one of the things that is starting to break away again, as I've kind of made this point for workers with felony convictions, the only options they have are in those ancillary positions, let's say in nursing homes. And the pressure to hire is not in those departments. The pressure to hire is in your CNA staff, your CMTs, and LPNs and RNs above that. So those workers get even higher wage increases because there's more need to fill those positions, whereas employers are refusing to raise, the wages of those workers in EVS and dietary because there's not that market pressure to increase it. So those workers are kind of stuck. They're seeing the benefits from the Fight for 15 movement, but they're not seeing, the other really economic gains that could be won.
Gary, anything that you'd like to add that hasn't been discussed?
Well, yeah. I would like to. I'd like to also mention that landlords prey on these workers too, or the people who haven't got expungement on their records too. Not only do bosses and companies prey on them, but landlords will often prey on these people as last chance resorts for homes. They'll give them dirty, shoddy homes. They'll with rents that are too high, and that also leads to higher recidivism and the lack of the ability to expunge records. So, I mean, it's really just a predatory system. And while we're here to speak for the working class, we've got to remember that when you're impoverished, you're spending your time in one or two places, at home or on the job. And I think the conversation also needs to not only attack the employers, but attack the landlords who are preying upon a system that impoverishes people.
Yeah, I'm really hearing from the panel this theme of a criminal record keeps people in those exploitative situations, and that's definitely by design, right? We know that that the carceral complex is very intentional, and I think that those collateral consequences and the ways that they keep people trapped in low wage jobs and in crappy housing conditions, it's certainly not by accident, right? And it's going to take, we're not going to change it by accident, and it's going to take a lot of intentional policy and intentional advocacy. Next question for the panel, just more about clean slate and really digging into what do you think this automatic expungement would do for the people that the people in your jobs and in your communities? Why do you think this is an important and necessary policy solution for Missouri? And I've been going to Fran first every time, so I'm going to switch it up and go back to you first, Gary.
Well, I hope my brothers and sisters at Local 249 don't chastise me too much, but I'm gonna paint with a very broad brush. My work is a lot of bending, twisting, turning. Oftentimes we find ourselves self-medicating, right? Because we have broken bones, bent backs, shoddy knees. And that also leads to complications with law enforcement and entering into the carceral state. So automatic expungement would mean the world to even union members, members of my union, because that would free them up from a myriad of problems that they have in their life, from finding places to live. Because I get paid a decent wage. It's not great, but it's decent, right? Enough to live. So, and many of my members do too. There always can be rooms for improvement. But that said, an automatic expungement would free up a lot of that money that they're using to try to get expunged for leisurely activities, for things that they want to do with their children, for hobbies they want to take on, for extra learning experiences. It would allow them to move out of their crappy apartments and into better ones if they so choose, buy a home if they so choose. But that's what it's about. This, to me, expungement is choice. It's the freedom of choice, and it's the freedom of choice that many of us in the working class aren't allowed to have.
I love that, Gary. I would agree. I think it is all about freedom of choice and opening up new opportunities for people.
I have a question. I have a friend who worked in reentry programs. In fact, I retired from Providence Counseling, and we had contracts for reentry programs, quote unquote reentry programs. What's the possibility that this automatic expungement could be coupled with these reentry programs, so that process of getting housing, and because the people I know who worked in that program were really struggling to get housing for people, and the participants, were discouraged because nothing was happening, and they're giving a time limit to make something happen, and nothing was happening. What about the possibilities of combining, this is part of the reentry process. This is expungement.
That's a really great question, Natalie, and a couple of things that I'll say to that. Is that included in the legislation is some language around judges like informing someone that they have an expungible offense. So from the get-go, someone is aware that the offense that they've been charged with is one that will be eligible for expungement after a certain period of time. The idea being, one, you want to let people know that this is something that will be available to them in the future, and then also it encourages people to stay crime-free and not have other interactions with the law enforcement during that waiting period. In terms of that reentry period, I think with Clean Slate in all states, it's been really important for community organizations and advocacy groups to be very involved in that implementation stage, to really make sure that people are aware that their records are getting expunged. Part of what this legislation includes is that OSCA, the Office of State Courts Administrator, would be tasked with building an online portal so people can log in and see if their record has been expunged or if they have a record that's eligible for expungement. But I think reentry organizations working closely with people, making sure that they're aware if they've got a offense that qualifies, and that they can make sure that that's happening, and that they can not continue to disclose if it's no longer necessary for them to do so, right? If someone doesn't know that their record's been sealed and they're still answering that question on background checks and on job applications, then it's like their record really hasn't been sealed. So we are almost ready to turn it over for questions from the audience. I do want to hear just from the rest of the panel if you had any more thoughts on Clean Slate and really the actual impact that you would see in the lives of those around you.
Don't have any more to say on what the impact would be, but I am interested actually in the passing of this legislation, because I think, as Gary knows, as a union member and everybody else as workers know, the Republican legislature is not usually an ally of working people, right? So to know that we have some Republican allies in this fight gives me some hope that, we're always hoping or looking for ways that we can find common ground. And I am excited about that possibility, and fingers crossed we can make it happen. But that's definitely the policy solutions are going to be immense. It's the process of how it happens that also could provide some good benefits.
Yeah, thus far in Missouri, Clean Slate has been a very bipartisan, very diverse campaign. And I think that it's because I feel like there's a really clear common sense argument for Clean Slate. I think that, pointing out that this legislation is already on the books, these, offenses are already eligible for expungement. We just want to expand them to the folks that actually qualify for it. Has been a really successful messaging point, and also highlighting that this is a business issue, right? It's an economic issue. It's about, being able for people to rejoin the economy at higher earning levels. And that's something that's been a really effective part of Clean Slate messaging and some of the other more conservative states that have passed it. So we're trying to learn from those that have gone before us. Jay, did you have something to add to that final point?
Yeah. So just, how it affect, my coworkers and members of our organization. It's just worker strength is in numbers. So if we can get those guys to feel more comfortable, speaking up, places like Amazon, other warehouses that don't have unions, where they're given those second chances, right? A lot of, that cat's gonna make me laugh, sorry. A lot of other companies, right, where they're prying on these guys that have these records and need these jobs. We would be able to mobilize them a lot easier. They would be less fearful of losing their job and then struggling to find another one. It would mean Amazon wouldn't be able to pry on them, and they would have to compete for our labor just that much harder, right? Because we would be forming unions. Amazon pays $18.90 to their highest, at their highest point, which takes 3 years to get to for a regular tier 1 associate. And it doesn't afford you an apartment in the community that Amazon's serving. So your most tenured employees at an Amazon facility can't buy a 2-bedroom apartment where they work. So I just think it's super important that for both workers and, for companies, right, for this to pass.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to our panelists for a really wonderful conversation. A lot of really important points that are being made, and some really good just sound bites. So I'm excited to be able to go back to this recording and quote some of you guys. I'd like to turn it over. If there's any audience questions, you can feel free to put those in the chat, or go ahead and come off mute and ask your question to the panel directly. There's been a lot of really good dialogue in the chat that I have not been keeping up with. But I urge folks to make sure that you're checking out the chat, because there's been some really good conversation.
Well, I got a little bit of a comment and a question, if that's okay. I'm Terrence Wise from Kansas City, Missouri, a co-worker of Fran, one of the panelists. So proud of you, Fran, and everyone who shared tonight. But as I sit here, Fran, I thought about how you said it stigmatizes you and it makes you feel some kind of way. And then even some folks listen may be like, what's Clean Slate got to do with me? And even I, being a leader like I am, I go through things with the criminal justice system and things that I think Clean Slate will help lead to even more things we can get done for workers when it comes to the criminal justice system. Currently, I do gig work as well, Uber driver, Lyft, and DoorDash, and work at Taco Bell, like I said, with Fran. And recently, y'all, I did get a speeding ticket in Overland Park. I paid the fine and paid it all off, but still yet, the ticket got back to Lyft. I drive for Uber and DoorDash still, but I drove for Lyft as well. And Lyft heard about it, the ticket, and suspended me from it. Now, that was a way I was making money. So I was like, damn, I paid for the ticket, took care of the fine, and I still got removed from work. And I just didn't think that was right, since I did what was right, paid the ticket and finished the legal process. And then even recently, y'all, with my kids, when I hear Gary talk about generational poverty and how it even attacks our kids, my daughter, who's a senior in high school, I'll be honest, she took money from her low-wage job. I'll keep their name out of it. And they got her on camera, y'all, taking $200. And of course, she knows it's not right. I asked her why she did it. She said, Dad, they just don't pay me enough to take care of senior dues, get stuff I need. I know you and Mom pay the bills or whatever. And we've been in touch with, Raytown Police, the prosecutor. My fiance's first question, is it going to be on their record? And they're like, we don't know. We're waiting on a court date this summer. She'll be 18 by the time of the court date. She's 17 now. So we even wonder how that's going to impact her college decision, her jobs moving forward, if it is on her record. And it's very traumatizing when you talk about work, wages, dealing with the criminal justice system. And we all play a part in it and live it out in our everyday lives. And so when I stand up with folks like Fran, Gary, and the other gentlemen fighting for clean slate, I know that we got to win this and a lot more to make things right and just in the criminal justice system for workers. So the question I got after that commentary is this just the beginning? You know, winning clean slate and then seeing what else we can mobilize, organize, and get done, and try to rectify with the criminal justice system when it comes to working poor and their families, you know? Thanks.
Thank you, Terrence. I certainly think if we can pass clean slate in Missouri, that it opens up the door for a whole host of other reforms. If we were able to pass this legislation, it would really put us on the forefront of making changes to a very harmful criminal legal system and its repercussions in a way that I don't think Missouri has really been situated on that side of things before. So I totally agree with you, Terrence. I think that clean slate would just be the ground floor.
I agree it'll be the ground floor, but I want to make a comment to your situation, Terrence, and I want to ask you a question. Why are we as workers expected to perform perfectly every day, every minute of our lives, while the very people who are putting us in this situation can have multiple mistakes and succeed by failure? I think it's very unfortunate that this was done to you. And make no mistake, while we play our part in our own lives, this life we live as workers is done to us intentionally and purposefully.
Thank you, Gary. Any other questions from the audience? Or things that you'd like to hear more about from a specific panelist? I think that there's just so much overlap between everything that we're talking about, right? Between how people are held back in low wage jobs, how people are held back by a criminal record. And I do really think that advancement in this area is advancement in a bunch of different areas. Curious, just while we've got some time and you guys have the platform, curious to hear what are some of the other like worker issues that that you would really like to see Missouri make or a locality make movement on in the next couple years.
Well, I did see that a PO put in the chat that she's an advocate for the people on her caseload. That often is not the case. In fact, this is the first time I ever heard a PO say that. And my clients who have had POs live in fear of their PO and are often held to unrealistic standards and requirements that even interfere with them. I've had clients who had to miss work for a PO visit, and if they didn't, they were in trouble. And yeah, POs that we need some reform in that area too. And we need just to reform, and once you get out of jail, get it over with. Why are people on probation for 5-10 years and parole? Just that whole thing.
Yes, there are 2 bills that have been filed in the House and the Senate, both by Republican sponsors, that would limit the amount of time somebody can be on misdemeanor probation. The issue of private probation is one that is a little bit unique to Missouri. There's only a handful of states that use these private probation companies. And there's, not really a limit to the fines and fees that they can put on people on their caseloads. So limiting the amount of time that somebody can be on probation for a misdemeanor is a good way to address it. So I appreciate those points. Did anybody from the panel have any other thoughts on other policy issues or other things, other intersections between the labor movement and criminal justice reform that you want to think about here in this space?
The only thing I'll chime in without a specific policy improvement is the way that, we have been able to make positive policy changes in the state is through our ballot initiative process, right? So that's how we did Medicaid reform. That's how we were able to raise the state minimum wage, which is currently now at $12 an hour, whereas the federal is $7.75 an hour. But one thing that we have not been able to overcome is where we have local control. So St. Louis and Kansas City can't have, let's say, a higher minimum wage. St. Louis and Kansas City couldn't move a ballot initiative that maybe had different rules for felons, right, and expungement locally, because the state would preempt that effort. And so there are efforts underway to look at, a statewide ballot initiative that would allow for local control. So if communities wanted to get together, put things on the ballot locally, that would actually be enforceable. The biggest danger we have right now in front of us, though, is that process seems to be target number one in the legislature, where they want to make it even more difficult, if not impossible, to qualify measures for the ballot through ballot initiatives. So we have to be very mindful of that, keep an eye out for it, be ready to fight it when if and when it happens.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, Lenny. A couple of those initiative petition attack bills have already moved out of committee, so it's definitely a top priority, both in the Senate and the House. Empower Missouri's website has some information about the initiative petition attacks, and you can sign up on our website for emails if you're not already on that list, and get calls to action when there's specific areas around initiative petition attacks that we want to mobilize people around, because it is one of the biggest mechanisms for people, voter-led actual democratic change. And it is definitely under attack in a very big way. The bills would raise the threshold for the amount of signatures that you need to get, or they're all a little bit different, but each of the bills is targeted at trying to make an initiative petition harder to get across the threshold.
I think Jonathan Duncan has his hand raised.
Oh, yeah, Jonathan, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Gary, for inviting me. I did have a question. I'm a leader with KC Tenants, the citywide tenant union in Kansas City. And, I see a lot of powerful union leaders here on this call. How can we organize our efforts better across, union lines, right? I see there's a lot of opportunity for us to make waves at the city level. Y'all are really smart people who are engaged. What's holding us back from crossing lines and essentially unionizing with one another for a centralized issue like clean slate? Like, y'all are on this call, but there should be way more people on this call is what I'm saying. So what is holding us back?
Well, I think what holding us back is our ability to organize. I mean, just as well as I do, Jonathan, you are an amazing organizer. Kansas City Tenants are amazing organizers. the Fight for 15 movement, the Missouri Worker Center. This is something that Missouri hasn't seen in decades, right? And I think we're right now we're seeing the future of Missouri. We're seeing all these people starting to come together. I believe right now we are starting the process to your question. Where unions are coming together. Unions are my union especially as partner, has helped KC Tenants. They go out with the Fight for 15. We have our hands in politics. We have our hands in all this other actions. And it's your groundwork. It's KC Tenants groundwork. It's the Fight for 15 movement, Stand Up KC's groundwork that has pushed and pushed and pushed Missouri into a better place. Yeah, it seems like Missouri gets darker and darker and darker, but you guys are the shining lights that are bringing us. We have the Kansas City, Jonathan and Janae and Tara and the hundreds of other KC Tenants instituted the Kansas City, the KC Tenants Bill of Rights that has done a myriad of good things, plus make tenants unions legal for the first time in Kansas City. The right to counsel, Stand Up KC has fought for better pay raises, which has impacted healthcare workers across that city. And I think what we got to do is focus on our rural brothers and sisters too, because this expungement also affects them. When the only good job's 20, 30, 40 miles away and you've got a DUI or something on your record, you can't drive there, forcing you to take these low wage jobs in rural Missouri. I think we're seeing, to answer your question, play out in real time, but it's just right there at the beginning stages.
And I can make a commitment to reach out to the state AFL-CIO to find out where they're at on this issue and to make the case why it should be seen as a labor bill, right? That's the challenge with the Missouri AFL-CIO. There's lots of attacks, lots of issues that are being dealt with at the legislature, so it's very defensive minded. So I want to check in to see where they're at on clean slate and see if they can get behind it. And I have to imagine, I'm not sure of this, but I have to imagine that the building trades, some of the locals like the laborers should be behind this. So I'll make a commitment to reach out and see where other unions are at.
Also, I just want to throw out that I have a lot of clean slate palm card materials. I'm based in St. Louis. If anybody would like some of those to distribute to workers or other labor leaders or anybody in your community, please let me know. I can get them to Jeremy or otherwise try to get them to you. And then for folks that are in Kansas City or elsewhere, I can certainly try to figure out how to mail them or otherwise get them across the state to you as well, if those would be useful. So just let me know. I'm going to put my email and phone number in the chat if anybody wants to follow up, not on this call. And Jay, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of spoke to the question that I was actually going to ask instead of answering anything. I think like the stats that you shared in the beginning of this presentation, they're severely felt and they're feared, but I don't think people have like a general knowledge of it, right? So kind of like, I think it was Jonathan said before me, it's awesome that we're all on this call, but for you guys, right, as organizers, some of you guys are already in unions or fighting for unions or organizers yourself, like what do you guys use, right, to get people to care? Because I really think a lot of people are just like so desperate just to keep swinging, just move on to one more day, right, that they can't stop to care, right? And obviously, like we all said, that's by design. What are you guys using to help them catch their breath and feel like they do have a moment to learn and figure that out?
I'll just for the lack of dead air, conversation, man. I mean, conversation. It goes. Organizing is 90% listening and 10% talking. Right. So you just listen to their problems and then you repeat it back and show that you're listening. I mean, we're all the same fly stuck in the same spider web. Right. But the only problem is we don't see the struggle of other people because we're too busy with our struggle. So we've got to show those threads that connect us. And once we do, and once we see that the web has caught us all, then we start fighting against the web and not against the webbing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of my biggest things is just like, I think Terrence had said earlier, it's like he didn't know that was going to happen, even though he paid that. Same thing with me. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen, right? I didn't know those arrests. Once I paid the thousands of dollars to get those to, not plead guilty to those cases, and they still followed me.
Yeah, brother, we're just being out organized right now. I mean, we just are. I mean, the people who have power set the narrative, and that narrative is they get to keep the power. And we're just being out organized. But they're not smarter than us. They're not better than us. The people with the power, we can outwork them. We can outwork them because we're the working class, and that's all we have to do is just set it forth and outwork them, brother. That's all we got to do.
And I think we need to be aware of corporate moves. I read an article today that Chipotle and a whole lot of other places that they spend millions to keep wages low. Millions. And that's money that they could be given to the workers.
Yeah. It's a choice.
A little bit on the way at my store or what we do. When I organize or I talk to my coworkers, I use their story, their life. What is it you're going through? Like, for instance, we have a worker that works 2 jobs, and she's 20. Baby, you're supposed to be discovering what life is about, and not busy trying to hold down 2 jobs. And that's your life, period, from work to work. And I use that to talk to them. Do you think that's fair? If you had a living wage or you were able to get these benefits, do you think life would be better for you?
Yeah.
And then they're like, yes. And then that's kind of how I use them. Like your own story, your own life, because you understand that your life is just as valuable as mine. And if we stand together and fight for what we believe in together, that my voice and your voice together will project more voices to come and project more to listen.
Yeah.
You're right, Fran. And I like to thank Jonathan for asking that tough question. Why aren't there more? As soon as you asked Jonathan, I thought, I got 2 brothers who have felonies on their records, who haven't had them expunged, did their time. One served damn near 2 decades in prison. He should be on this call. He should know about Clean Slate. It reminds me of when we used to ask people, who do you know that works in fast food or low wage? And even if people in the room didn't do it, they knew someone who did. And they cared about that person. So they're invested. They should have that person in the room. And that really hit home, Jonathan. I'm like, I could have brought more to here. And it's like Gary said, but everybody's caught up in their own struggle. I know workers who would probably love to have been on in this space, but they had to work tonight. Not making excuses for the working class, but it is opportunity for us to grow our space and even be creative in doing so. And we got to always challenge each other and ask those tough questions and not just have the fuzzy feel-good moments. Where did we miss out on opportunities of packing this meeting? So thank you for addressing that, Jonathan, for real.
It's really, really great conversation. Any other questions or thoughts from the audience, from our panelists? If not, I will give you
No,
all.
no, no. I got one for Fran. I'm sorry, Fran. I'm sorry for calling you out, Fran, at the end. But Fran, talking to Andre that we work with, and I talked to a few of my Uber passengers who I noticed they went through jail, served their time, then got out on probation, like you said. And Andre that we work with and one of my passengers were on house arrest too, and have to pay for the probation, pay for the house arrest, pay for the monitoring. Some of them, Dre said he 2,000 behind. My passenger said he's 5,000 behind. Fran, did you face something like that where you had to pay for probation or any monitoring when you got out of incarceration? And didn't that hinder you as far as you weren't making enough money as well, but had to pay for services like that? Did you have to deal with that, Fran?
I didn't have to deal with that because I paid my restitution while being locked up. As far as with my parole officer, no, I can't say that. I actually was blessed not to have to go through that, but I still had to jump through hoops, just not financial ones per se.
All right.
Yeah, that those supervision services, talk about predatory. There's a lot of very predatory practices that goes along with that. I've worked with a lot of folks that have not been able to keep up with those payments. And they can just be like all, you know, they're very accumulative. So you've got the ankle bracelet, you've got your private probation officer fees, anger management, urinalysis testing. It can all just kind of get quickly compiled on top of each other and makes it very difficult for somebody to be in compliance with their supervision.
And real quick, it goes back to that revolving door, is that and that recidivism to where they're gonna try to trap you to make it to you're gonna return because I'm gonna make it hard for you to get out here to survive.
Yes, it is that vicious circle. It's very hard. I like the spider web analogy. It's very hard to disentangle yourself from that cycle. Jay, you had your hand up.
Yeah, but you don't need to call on me toward the end or when we're wrapping up.
I think we're wrapping up.
Awesome. So I just wanted to say I don't know too many of you people on the call, but I did notice that I'm going to assume Terrence is the Terrence that I've heard a lot about. And Fran, I've seen a couple of your videos, and I think the same Daniel that I've been around at a couple of events. All of you guys are awesome and inspiring. I just wanted to let you guys know that because I hate speaking and you guys are helpful. So thank you.
You did well, brother. You did great.
Yeah, Jay, I've heard you speak twice now, and I would never ever guess that you hate speaking. You're
It's a struggle.
Yes, I couldn't tell at all.
Y'all did great. Thanks for sharing your stories.
Yeah, I'm feeling very inspired, very fired up. Like I said, there's just been so many good dialogue points and good discussion points made this evening, and a lot of just like really good quotes. You guys are just very quotable, so thank you for that. All right, well, if there's no other comments, that any of our other panelists want to wrap up and say anything before we sign off?
Yes, one more thing I want to say real quick. You guys, we have a chant that we say, and we always say when we fight,
we win.
We win.
So you guys gotta remember, we gotta keep this fight up and we gotta keep fighting.
Yes.
What's next?
Great question. So I just dropped in the chat a link to the campaign website. And you know what, I'm actually just gonna real quickly share my screen and show you where on the website you can sign up to get involved. So this Take Action button, if you go there, you can sign on. with your name to sign on for our support letter. This is really important. We're trying to get as many individual names as possible to show Missouri legislators that the people of Missouri want clean slate. If you work with an organization or a community group and you think that they'd like to get involved as an organization, you can go to Partner with Clean Slate and sign up there. And then last but not least, if you know a small business or a big business that would be interested in supporting Clean Slate, those business testimonies from people in the business community are really important. So other people in the business community can find out about Clean Slate and get on board. So we've got a special part of the website for businesses to sign on. Any of those actions on the website will get you added to the Clean Slate newsletter and updates. So when there are specific calls to action, when the bills get hearings, if we're looking for folks to help contribute with testimony or anything like that, you'll get those call to action alerts.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you to our panelists, Jay, Fran, Lenny, Gary. You guys were amazing and just gave us all a lot to think about when it comes to why this is a workers' issue, why this is something that Missouri needs to be implementing. So thank you all for your time. Feel free to email me if you'd like to stay in touch about the campaign or about anything with the Community Justice Coalition. We're engaged in a lot of different criminal legal reform issues beyond Clean Slate, including some of what we've been talking about tonight with fines and fees and supervision issues. So if you'd like to come to a coalition meeting or get otherwise involved, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd love to connect. So thank you all. We'll go ahead and give you your 10 minutes back. I hope everybody has a wonderful and relaxing evening.
Thank you. You as well, man.